Welcome, Assalamu alaikum, everyone, to this inaugural Muslim Institute Book Club event. My name is Hassan Muhammad Ali, and I'm director of the Muslim Institute, and I'm co-hosting. And I want to welcome everybody who's joined us, and especially those who are not members of the Muslim Institute. A special welcome to you. And we're well represented today from people in the UK, but also from other places across the world. So that's fantastic. And the title of this series of events is the Post-9/11 Great American Novel Book Club. And I hope you're going to join us for all the four sessions as we go through this most fascinating subject. The way that I see it, it's like a kind of insight into the American psyche in response to 9/11 and the ensuing war on terror, and reflected through the lens of the great American novel. And tragically, as people already said, the contemporary resonances surround us once more. You should have all received your exclusive PDF of Dr. Sheikh's book. And tonight we're going to be concentrating on the introduction to that book. And just on a personal note, I studied 20th century American literature as an undergraduate very, very many moons ago. And I fell in love with the great American novel. So when proposed this, I was really taken with it. The novels of Upton Sinclair and Saul Bellow and Harper Lee, Capote, Hemingway, the list goes on and on and on. It's an incredible genre. And I'm absolutely fascinated to see how the great American novel has evolved as it's kind of hit the 21st century, because that's kind of what we're talking about. Now, the format will be a presentation with slides, followed by time for questions, comments, and thoughts. The session is an hour and a quarter long, and I aim to finish as much as on time as possible. So don't keep you all. And if you want to post questions in the comments as we go along, you're most welcome to, and I'll try and keep up with them and relay them back to Dr. Sheikh, and I'm sure he'll have a look as well. And at the very end of the session, I'll just very shortly give you some information regarding the next session as we go through the series. So let me introduce our guide for the next four episodes of this deep dive into the post-9/11 great American novel. Dr. Sheheryar B is a 2023 PhD graduate from the University of Saskatchewan. He's published two acclaimed novels with HarperCollins India. He's currently a Donald Hill Family Postdoctoral Fellow at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where he's working on several projects, including a third novel on father-son relationships, a set of short stories about immigrant women, and a world-building set of novellas, short stories, and vignettes set in an ecumenopolis of a world city set 500 years from now, which is right up my street, I have to say. And he's presenting this in relation to his just published monograph, the Post-9/11 Great American Novel, which was published by Bloomsbury in 2025. And there it is. And it's over to you, Sheheryar.
Thank you, Hassan. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome. This is a pleasure for me to join you from Canada, to be able to talk worldwide almost with everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to share all the research that I've gathered and all the work that I've done over the past 5 or 6 years now. I want to thank my two people, especially my mom, who passed away a couple of years ago, and my supervisor. They have believed in me more than I've ever believed in myself. They pushed me to the edge and beyond in trying to do my best and making me a better person while I was doing it. So the post-9/11 Great American Novel, I'm going to break it down very, very into very simple terms for you. And I'm glad that Hassan especially replied to my idea of having a talk with the Muslim Institute by saying, let's have a series of talks. Let's really flesh this out. Let's talk about this topic so that we can actually figure out how to talk about the multiple aspects of it as a community. And I was very happy about that because that allows me to flesh out all of the ideas separately, the introduction separately, each chapter on each novel separately, So what I'm going to be doing is just talking about the introduction of the monograph today. And it has some conceptual layers that need to be broken down, and then we can discuss them in the quick Q&A. But at every step, I'll keep asking you if we're doing okay, if you're doing okay, if you need me to go over something. Um, and in the next session and the three sessions after this, two will be on separate chapters, two chapters at a time, and the session will be on a conclusion and moving forward. What are we seeing beyond the early years of the post 9/11 American novel, Great American Novel? So I want to read to you why I came to this scholarship, and this is from the beginning uh, of my monograph. But I first I want to like start the slides, and let me just see. Share this, bring it to the center, start the slides. Can you guys see the slides? Thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So first, I want to acknowledge the fact that I am standing on the shoulders of giants when I gathered this research and I present it to you. There are people who have created amazing works, not just on post 9/11 literature, but on discourse, on power structures, on literature that enable me to do the kind of reflection that I'm able to do. I also benefit from a civilization in Canada and in North America that is constructed on the foundations of genocide, slavery, and ongoing systematic discriminations. And my wish in this and future projects is to be and to create bridges of reconciliation and equity between settlers, indigenous communities, and my own and other immigrant groups. Following the light created by giants of research and scholarship, I aim to nurture, create, and write works that are informative, beneficial, and ecologically healing. So, I just want to read you a page and a half of why I came to this research and also explain why this is important for us in the ongoing moment. Even though September 11th was, it's going to be 25 years on September 11th this year that will have passed. Okay. So, for as long as I can remember, I have been academically and personally interested in studying end times and eschatology. In the last few years, my research into apocalypses and apocalyptic events drew me to examine more closely a specific event that has influenced my life more than any distant terminal apocalypse. When the terrorist attack of Tuesday, September 11, 2001 happened, I was a first, let me just pass this forward. I was a first semester junior at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, USA. I remember going to my brother's room. He was a senior at FNM at the time. And I watched on TV as the second plane hit the Second World Trade Center tower. And then we spent the rest of the day hooked to the news broadcasts, terrified of the sudden violence, afraid of going outside into the mostly white campus, and fervently hoping that no Muslims or Pakistanis were involved in the attack. Of course, that hope was quickly quashed as it was discovered that the 19 terrorists were all of Muslim origin. During my last 2 years of college, the US government not only launched its war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq, but a year after that, in 2004, also began using Pakistani air bases for drone attacks in North Waziristan against Pakistani civilians that the United States labeled as suspected terrorists. Meanwhile, I graduated from college, worked for 2 years in Pakistan, and returned to the United States for an MFA in creative writing in South Bend, Indiana. The hassles of extra security checks to acquire a student visa, flight permissions, and regular clearance from the National Security Entry Exit Registration System, or NCERS, were cumbersome new additions to the travel experience. But compared to other Muslims in the Middle East and Southeast Asia that the US drones and troops were targeting, my plight was trivial. And I dutifully complied with all that was required of me because of my race and my religion as a brown Muslim other in the United States. The special targeted treatment of Arab-looking Muslims in the United States did not seem problematic to me because I faced little discrimination directly. In 2007, I completed an MFA in creative writing at the University of Notre Dame, where I not only became critically aware of the concept of the great American novel, but even attempted to write a great Pakistani-American great immigrant novel of my own. Of course, since I'm not American, I could only attempt a hybrid version. In my manuscript, titled imaginatively Americans, I attempted to create a metafiction that also breaks the boundaries between nonfiction and other forms, manipulating footnotes and other paratextual spaces and varying fonts, thereby playing into what Kevin Hayes calls the great American novel of tradition of inventing a new form to fit a new story. More recently, while combining apocalyptic studies and research on 9/11 novels at the University of Saskatchewan, I published a creative critical hybrid essay exploring the pared down language and signifiers in Cormac McCarthy's seminal post 9/11 The Road. Post 9/11 novel The Road. In the 2 decades since the terrorist attack, I have engaged deeply with and sought to analyze the ways in which the trauma of white Americans has influenced the lives of Middle Eastern looking Muslims in the United States. I now find it reasonable to assume that there have been direct and indirect ramifications of 9/11 on the trajectory of my professional and personal life by living within and outside the United States. The focus of my research for now, especially for this book, therefore, is on the terrorist incident's immediate and short term aftermaths. And it features my interventions with which I not only contribute to the scholarship in this field, but also understand the influence on my life as a Muslim scholar and the producer of literature in North America. So since this book came out, it has been doing pretty well in the review circuits, but mostly what I wanted to do was set up a series of talks where I could talk to communities, not just academic communities, but general communities, and share my research, share my findings, because they're quite illuminating to see like how literature informs policy and vice versa, and how much the discourse, which is the set of like words we say and like produce and like and then collect into the ether around us, they influence how we think, especially America as it thinks as an imperial project. So I have personal stakes in this, and I believe all of us should have personal stakes in this because it resonates further than we can think. So this is the novel. I want to first focus on 9/11 and its meanings and its reverberations. And I'm sure that all of us are old enough to understand and to remember to remember where we were when 9/11 happened, because it's such a seminal event in our history. If not where we were exactly at the moment when it was happening, the 2 3 hours, but that day, the environment, the month, the year, the week, the when the world started changing. So 9/11, of course, like the resonance of it begins with the number itself, 9/11. It's a metonym. It contains the explosive meanings of terrorist attack and September 11th and 2001 and like the anniversary America attack. All of those things are contained within this one metonymic thing. 9/11, you say 9/11, that's the one thing that contains that. Now, many other nations since then have had terrorist attacks by Muslims or Islamists or violent Islamists, like the radical Islamists, and they've tried to own different kinds of small numerical numbers, tried to make a numerical game of it, such as 2611 for India, 77 for the UK, and a couple others, like including Spain, Spain's 311, and now Israel's October 7th. All of these dates, however, do not hold the special significance of echoing the use of a daily communications channel for crisis, an emergency number. So that's what the emergency number is. It stayed with us because of its emergency number thing. The echoes of it are found in those other reverberating terrorist attacks. So they are brought back and they echo this original major schismatic event of the earlier 21st century. But they're not the original thing. They're just echoes. But the more disastrous thing for the world, and not just for Muslims, but just for the world, and unfortunately, has been the looming tower, the shadow of the looming tower as they fall, and it continues to fall because it has not been dealt with. Trauma has not been dealt with, and the politics of it has not been dealt with in intelligent, responsive ways. There has just been reaction from the belligerent United States of America and its allies as they fall in line with American policies. So the tower is falling continuously, and it continues to fall. It is not fallen yet. And it is the intra war on terror moment that we're living in, unfortunately. Even COVID, which was a world binding event or could have been, has not been able to displace the discourses. They've been reactivated as soon as they could be to serve the nefarious means, the nefarious like objectives of the empire and its imperialist motives. And there is so much unresolved trauma. There is trauma not just for the Muslims or for the white Americans, but it's trauma for everybody. But it has been owned especially by white Americans. And that's a problematic ownership. It is not a fair ownership. And it has damaged the psyche of the world because the white Americans owned this trauma. Um, I want to discuss two terms specifically that we will build on once we will go further into the future discussions. So the first of these is the Muslim question. I hope it echoes for you when I say the Muslim question, another kind of question that existed in the 20th century, but it still continues to exist. Like there is the idea of the Jewish question, right? I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Yeah, the Jewish question. What to do with the Jews? As white Anglo-Saxon Protestants did in the United States, but it stretches back to the 1700s and even earlier. What should we do with the Jews? Right? So it's a very fraught topic, obviously. Like, why should a community be so persecuted and isolated and segregated and othered into one specific entity, and why does it have to be dealt with? But unfortunately, we find that not just happening with the Jewish people now. We find that happening with other communities as well. What to do with trans people? What to do with them? So the sexuality, race, ethnicity, all these othering mechanisms have been applied, and then the question becomes what to do with them. And it can never be just let them live. It has to be how to deal with them. The Muslim thing becomes even more nefarious because of the idea that white Americans have taken ownership of 9/11's trauma for not forget and completely forgetting the idea that anybody else died. Black people died, brown people died, Jewish people died. This was an attack not on a white race. This was an attack on the state of America for the political interventions and all that. And at the same time, the politics of it got hijacked by the white trauma narrative. And so, based on that, it became what should we do with the people who perpetrated this? And not just that, but like with all of the people surrounding that, with all the people who look like that, who might be sleeper cell candidates, who might be activated, as they sometimes sporadically keep activating here and there, and then they start causing mayhem. So that became the central narrative concern of policy, as well as of literature, which we will see in a bit. So within 3 months of 9/11, yeah, 3 months, early December 2001, Don DeLillo, who is one of the major novelists, still working, still active, one of the major novelists in America, wrote an article in The Atlantic called In the Ruins of the Future. And in it, he called all American writers, mostly white American writers, by his language, non-Muslim American writers. He wanted them to start writing the counter narratives. The counter narratives being the narrative that would take back control of culture from terrorists, from brown people, and from Muslims. Take it back. Take back this narrative so that we can have the say in culture that is important. We need to create culture. So that was called the counter narrative. But the problem with that is that it is so reminiscent of an earlier call to create literature in the American psyche that it's foundational to the American thing. So let me just talk to you about the foundational myths of America. We've all heard of we should have all heard of these things. Manifest Destiny, which is that America, when it was being founded, the whole of the land, the eastern part was taken over by little bits of genocide, but we should also take up the whole frontier. So the westward movement of the wagons, it's our manifest destiny. That's the excuse that they used. It's our manifest destiny to take over the rest of the land. The idea of the American dream in multiple ways, which is like freedom from slavery, complete merit, everybody's born equal. The myth of it, right? But while the action of it is completely belied by the genocide and the slavery and everything like that, right? The shining city upon the hill, the religious symbol of the New Jerusalem that America was supposed to be. Thanksgiving, Pocahontas, live liberty and the pursuit of happiness, one nation indivisible, and then the great American novel. And this also comes into it. In 1868, right after the end of the Civil War in 1865, when there's so much fracturing of the nation, the North has fought the South. So many states have fought each other, and like finally they've been able to like say, okay, fine, the Emancipation Proclamation, everything like there's okay, fine, we're going to end slavery, which never really ended, but it's shifted gears into something else. But William DeForest, a critic and a journalist, came up with the term of the Great American Novel. The Great American Novel, in his opinion, was needed at that time to join a fractured nation in one narrative, to create this idea of like we are a united nation. The call for such a narrative or such narratives was already there since the Declaration of Independence in 1776, but like this became even more urgent after the end of the Civil War. And William DeForest said that it doesn't need to be a single one. It can be Moby Dick, as well as Uncle Tom's Cabin, as well as Huckleberry Finn. So all of these started to build what was called a pluriverse of the Great American Novel. It's never going to be called the Great American Novels, even though it is a pluriverse, but it is a pluriverse of the singular concept, which there is the exploration of what we are as a nation, right? So there is also the myth that America self-corrects. So America is this, we had slavery, but we corrected it. Over time, we corrected it. We have segregation, but we corrected it. We have no women's rights, but we corrected. So there's this myth, as if like no other nation is also doing the same thing, right? So every single nation goes through these iterative moments of constitutional existence and laws and ideas of itself. But only America has this exceptional thing about we are doing it metacognitively. We are thinking about it. So this American myth. And of course, the biggest one of them is being the American exceptionalism. We are the exceptional nation. All nations say this, but only America is able to proliferate it because of its media infrastructure, which proliferates all the airwaves in every single corner of the world by design. We are all living in an extension of America. If we watch the same media programs, we are literally living in America, even if we're not living there, because we're absorbing the culture either through osmosis or through what's it called? Uncritical, non-critical thinking and non-critical in, immersion into the culture. For example, you want to put something on Netflix. Oh, let's just put on some Friends and do something. It's in the background. It's there, but it's there. It's pervasive. It's always there. So Netflix itself is an American thing, but unless you choose to opt out and choose something else that is not on the main menu, you're always going to be immersed in something American. Clothes. We're always immersed in American clothes. We're in hoodies, we're in like sweaters, we're in the American garb, right? So the American exceptionalism is there. So what about the Great American Novel? Is everybody with me so far? Does anybody need any conceptual explanations on anything, or are we good to go on?
I think we're good to go.
Good to go. Okay. So the Great American Novel, this is the second concept that I want to get across. So I never use the Great American Novel, this thing, as a straight text because there is no such thing. It's been used to try to rally people together. So whenever I'm going to use the Great American Novel, the term, I'm always going to use it in quotes. The way it's been used, the way I use it as a lens as well to look at America and its discourse right now. So the criteria for the Great American Novel that William DeForest and some subsequent critics, and even now looking back, some critics come up with it are, these are the four criteria. It should encompass the entire nation. So it cannot be about one region specifically. For example, it can't be just be about New Orleans. It can't just be about this California subculture of skateboarding. It cannot be just about like this one thing. It has to like have the span of a wider vision of the entire nation. What even if it's about like a tiny specific thing, it has to have this overarching extrapolation possible. It has to be democratic in spirit and form, so it has to involve many different community people within the community, and it has to have their say or their political views or their identity views involved in it. It has to have the author has to be born in America or has to be complete or has to have adopted America as their base. So, for example, Nabokov, when he wrote Lolita, it was considered one of the great American novels because there was a lot of travel within the American landscape. But then at the same time, the language of it, the higher power of his language, even though the disgusting topic and everything about pedophilia, but it was lauded as a great American novel. Um, and then the cultural worth of that work must grow over time. Nabokov being Russian, then he came over, and so an immigrant who adopts that thing as well. But also like people like Jhumpa Lahiri and other people who've immigrated or have are children of immigrants and have become so voice of the culture of the moment. So they can be American, the great American novelists. Then the cultural worth must grow over time. So its whole value cannot be realized in its own time. It only must keep growing. Such as Moby Dick. At its time, it was seen as a good novel. Uncle Tom's Cabin and The Scarlet Letter. The worth of them has grown over time so that they become canonized as these great novels. Whereas at that time, they were probably just coming out as novels that are good and good for culture. There's been many novels, and I'll show you just a few of them. Moby Dick, The Great Gatsby, Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird, Hubert Selby Jr.'s Requiem for a Dream. This one is my favorite, and this is my favorite entry in the American Dream pre 9/11 Great American Novel Studies in terms of fiction because it actually directly examines the dream. If you've not seen the movie, which is a very, very loyal depiction of the text, which is fantastic because the text manipulates the pages is manipulated on the pages, but with the punctuation changes and many different things that Hubert Selby Jr. does. But it's just a beautifully filmed thing and a beautifully written thing, and it examines what the worth of personal dreams versus the American dream is for people, and thereby critiques the American dream because the American dream is always going to fail. The American dream of get rich, go for that out there rather than use your personal value, build your community. It's about not building your community. Get rich, get on TV, get that the drug, the high fix. So that's what I'll leave you with. But like it shows how the American dream is a hollow object that cannot be pursued. Everybody should have their own dream, not the American dream, is what the critique is in that novel. And it's a beautiful, magnificent take. So the pre 9/11 Great American Novel was focused on the American dream through multiple lenses and four that some critics have pointed out. And I'm not bothering with the critics' names because this is not a citation-based presentation that I'm giving to you, but these are what they came up with. So up from, or like, like up from slavery or up from self-making, like rags to riches kind of American dream critique of that. And this can be The Great Gatsby, even Huckleberry Finn. But then there's also the racial divide, which is a separate one, which is showing the ending of slavery as a concept, ending of wealth disparity, ending of regional differences. That's the romance of the divide kind of the American dream. Then there's the mega novels of microcosms, such as Don DeLillo's works about like garbage, just garbage being dealt with in America in the urban places, as well as um, like Thomas Pynchon, like very highbrow novels written by like the people considered like the epitome of culture at this time. So those are the mega novels of microcosms. And then there's the works like The Scarlet Letter, which don't really hold merit on their own when you study them now, but they've been talked about so much, canonized so much, that they themselves become the American dream for the authors who wrote them. They become these like canonical markers that this was an event in the history of American literature. So far, so good. So let's move to post 9/11. The post 9/11 Great American Novel is completely different. So let's go back again. The pre 9/11 Great American Novels, the Uber, the collection is all about the American dream, and they're very critical of how the American dream is being pursued. They're critical of it. It's not like they're saying like the American dream is here, and when you reach it, they're not potboilers and thrillers saying that oh you made it, you married the girl, you got the riches, you're set. They're not talking about that. They're saying the American dream is very tough for some people to get. It's a matter of luck for most of it. And if you reach there, it can be hollow. So they are saying that, but the focus is on these kinds of dreams. The dream of this, the being freedom from slavery, freedom from being boxed into a community that you don't want to be boxed into, freedom from like wealth disparity, freedom from other things that are holding you back as a human being. But the post 9/11 Great American Novel is centered on the Muslim question. Don DeLillo, when he writes that article, which is a manifesto for writing the new great American novel, the new novel that will unite the nation, he writes about Islam. He's asking to write from the rubble. He's asking the writers to start from the rubble, but then consider the Muslims as an entity. And when he writes that article, if you want to search for it, in the ruins of the future, you'll find it on The Guardian at least. And The Atlantic no longer has a link to it, but the Guardian does. And you'll see how he conflates Islam with Islamist terrorism and shows a woman praying at the end of his article as somebody who is part of the landscape but needs to be addressed. And the last words of the article are Allahu Akbar, God is great. And there's no discussion on like why he put that in there. So that's there, right? And there's many things that I will talk about when I go to the next session about what he does in his novel, Falling Man, which he wrote 5 years after 9/11. And there's much to discuss over there because of the textual manipulation of Islamic and Muslim things in that. But for now, he creates this manifesto and everybody seems to be following it. Okay, let's start from the rubble, focus on the rubble, and then move forward and consider the Muslim subject as the center. Many novels start off like this, many early novels. And the ones that do, some of them are pathetic in the way they treat the idea. For example, one of the novels that I studied, Terrorist, is absolutely pathetic. John Updike was a fantastic writer early in his years, but in the later years, when he became close to the end, he was a pathetic Islamophobe, with no nuance in his understanding of what the subject was that he was treating, and he wrote this book with very um, ethnophobic and terrible language about Muslims, about Black people, considering them as objects in his work, always comparing Black people to the shades of wood that their skin color was like, and nothing else. Just giving them the most terrible language, and but it's so he had nothing important to say about Islam, and we'll come to that in detail, except that Islam should be eradicated from the Muslim even. The Muslims need to be secularized also. So we'll come to that. But yeah, but the others, there are nuances in the discussion or the depiction or the representation of how Islam exists in the United States in the post 9/11 moment. There is nuance. The center remains on how white Americans have been affected, especially white American women and white American children have been affected by 9/11. So that's a like the innocence, the gendered idea of the women should not be bothered, the children should not be affected, the innocent are being slaughtered in America and or under threat from Americans from Americans who are Islam influenced by Islam. Islam, if it continues to exist, will make us lose this innocence. Will be attacking us constantly. So this thing, right? So that enters the subject and it remains the center, where while also treating the idea, oh, this is more complicated than us versus them. So there is perpetuation as well as criticism of what they are representing at the same time. So, and we'll go into that in detail once we get into the chapters. But there's considerable nuance, and I will give credit where it's due. But at the same time, the center is always on the trauma, the unmitigated trauma, the unaddressed trauma, and the reactions of the white Americans and through white American eyes. Um, Yeah, so the idea of 9/11 becomes this fractured thing that's never going to resolve into a full picture. There's this terribly refracted idea of how the towers fell and what the moment is and what it means for the individuals in the novels. Um, and when we get into the chapters, I'll discuss this in more detail as well, but there are the four treatments that are given to Muslims. And the first one is always repression in each of the novels. And repression means pushing away the idea, or pushing it down so hard, like pushing the spring down and hiding it, so that if you encounter the idea of Islam or Muslims in even in like text or even thinking about it, you push it away. So, for example, in Jonathan Safran Foer's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, we'll see how a kid who is going around all the boroughs of New York on foot and by train, he never encounters a Muslim. He's thinking about 9/11 constantly because his father died in it. And he's going on a quest to find the meaning of his father's life. He never encounters a Muslim in all of the boroughs of New York. He encounters only two people of color. And there's this repression happening every time he comes close to the idea of 9/11 in his thinking, he pushes it away until it explodes at him in the form of a specter. At the top of the Empire State Building, he climbs there and he sees a terrorist coming in a plane at him. It's not actually happening, but the specter, the repression will always collapse. That's the idea, and we'll discuss that much more in when we get to that discussion. So the first mechanism of occluding the Muslims, of cutting out, removing, excising the Muslim, and cutting him out of discourse is repression. First mechanism. The second one is appropriation. And appropriation is a very nefarious mechanism by which you start owning the other. What you do is you take their textuality or something about them that is fundamentally true and cannot be changed, and you warp it. For example, in Don DeLillo's Falling Man, two things happen textually that are complete appropriations, and they have very severe implications and meaningfully violent textual things. So what first happens is the children in that novel, in Falling Man, start playing this game where they start looking into the sky after 9/11 for this character called Bill Lawton. So it's not Bin Laden anymore. It's Bill Lawton, Bill Lawton. So they're looking for a character that they've created so that they can play a game so that's easy for them. The other one, it has multiple implications, and we'll talk about that when we come to that. But the other one is even more nefarious, and that's dangerous for discourse. So one of the characters, the woman in the novel, remembers the first line of the Quran being something. Now, who can tell me what the first line of the Quran is? Anybody raise their hand? What is the first line of the Quran? You don't need to raise your hand, just say it if you know the first line of the Quran. Anyone? First line of the Quran.
اقرأ باسمك الذي خلق.
No, that was the first revealed thing. It's chronologically. But like in the text, like what's the first line of the Quran?
Well, the Fatiha, Surah Fatiha, Alhamdulillah Rabbil
Yeah,
Alamin.
and it starts with
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, so we know this. Everybody knows that the first line of the Quran is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So what Don DeLillo does is he puts into the mouth of his one of his characters, or into the memories of one of his characters. I don't remember the exact quote, but she remembered the first line of the Quran as she had heard it in her dentist's office, which is, "This book is not to be doubted." Now, it might seem like a simple change in terms of like what the thing is, but it's repeated three times, and Don DeLillo, the author, never corrects it or for the audience that, oh, but it was the wrong line. And imagine that this is the first half of the second line of the second chapter. It's not, it's in Surah Baqarah, the second chapter. It's the second line and the first half of it. And think about if this is the first line of the Quran. If somebody imagines this is the first line, they're thinking, okay, so the followers of this religion are uncritical and they are not allowed to doubt anything. They're not allowed to question anything. They're a horde. They are uncritical and a horde. So that's the kind of other that she creates of Muslims in her head. And imagine then that how would she want to deal with Muslims? And that is how she deals with Muslims and Islam in that novel. So it's a thing that I disambiguate or turn or expand the meanings of based on, was it the author's intent? Was it the character's intent? Was it a memory play? What are we as readers supposed to take away from it? So we'll extrapolate that when we come to that in the second chapter in next week. So that's the second one, appropriation. The third one is secularization. So Updike, as I talked about, his terrible novel. Please don't read it. I have a summary in my book. Just don't read it. Just don't give him any money, even though he's dead. It's the worst novel that you can ever read. I even wrote a review of the novel as when it came out, 2007. And the title of my review was, "When Will Updike Stop?" And he died the next year. So that was perfect. I mean, like I didn't kill him, but he stopped. Thank God. It's an insult to literature. Please don't read it. But secularization is the mechanism by which the white people in his novel deal with the Muslims. Secularization theory being the idea that as scientific progress increases, religion will die out from society. Right? So religion is this backward thing that science will eradicate the more rational societies get. But at the same time, like there's no rational society in the world. Every single thing is infused with either Judeo-Christianism or Hinduism or something, right? Some ideology does infuse it. America is Judeo-Christian completely to its core. And you cannot call that a secular society. So he's trying to convert the would-be bomber to non-Islam, to completely eradicate his ideology, is Islam from his being, and then to adopt Americanism. He says you can be an American, an Arab American. That's it. That's all you need to be, an Arab American. Leave the Islam bit out. It's nonsense anyway. And this is a school counselor telling a kid, which he's not supposed to talk about religion, but he does. Anyway, so it's a fantastic study of like what a racist treatment of the other is. It's a fantastic study. But that's the third mechanism, secularization. Remove Islam from the Muslim, and then the Muslim is rendered safe because he's no longer Muslim. And the fourth one is adversarial othering. So Amy Waldman's The Submission is the novel in which a Muslim appears in the post-9/11 moment in the novel. And what happens is the premise of the novel is, if you haven't read it, and it's worth reading for the treatment of like how white America early in the post-9/11 moment saw the Muslims as liberal as you could get a treatment of. So the Muslim appears in public. What happens is there's a blind competition 2 years after 9/11 for what will be the memorial at that stage, at the ground zero place. And a Muslim wins the blind competition with the 11 jury members deciding, oh, this garden project, let's build this. This garden is so healthy. Everybody would want that. Then they take out the name of the architect and it's like Muhammad Khan. Okay, so Muhammad Khan has to like be given the prize of making the garden. And then the controversy starts. Is he designing the garden to be a place for the martyrs? The suicide bombers are martyrs to him? What is this? So it turns into this whole controversy, right? But the Muslim who wins on merit, who disavows the terrorism, he wants it to be a piece of place, a place of peace. He is not allowed to create that because merit is not what works in America. It is merit if you're not Muslim, right? So at that moment, in the post 9/11 moment, all civil liberties are intact except the civil liberties allowed to Muslims. And there's wonderful debates in this novel. Some very very good ones. Some that need work in terms of like how can you do this? The very like killing off the nice Muslim is not Muhammad Khan, but like another nice Muslim who turns out to be the conscience of the people. When she stands up and says like my husband died in 9/11, and then the nation pauses, and then it's found out. Yeah, and then she's killed, and then yeah, all good Muslims, all dead Muslims are good Muslims, or all good Muslims are dead Muslims. That thing, like the conflation of that, it's terrible treatment, but at the same time, understandable given the political discourse at the time and the easy fix for the author. So the submission, these four treatments, and these are the four things that we'll go into in the next two sessions. And then there will be a conclusion in which we discuss like further novels, a few more discoveries that I made, combining the research of these chapters to extrapolate where does it go from here, as well as like what new trends have happened since these novels, since these early novels. So yeah, let me see. Like, do I have more in here? I think that should be it. Yeah. So those are the sessions coming up. April 8th would be chapter 1 and 2, and that's the Foer and DeLillo novels. April 22nd will be chapters 3 and 4, and sorry, the conclusion and implications and further discussion that we want to have with between us. That'll be on April 29th. I think that's it for me. But I really want to have this discussion. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're thinking, and if I can clarify anything that I haven't clarified yet.